Welcome back. As I was talking about President Trump's visit in India, gigantic crowds, 110,000 person stadium, cricket stadium. And as you saw from the pictures, it was pretty much full. A 14-mile motorcade, a very warm welcome for President Trump. And again, he returned the favor. He talked about how democratic the government there was. That may be something of an exaggeration, or maybe not. You can still have a democracy that has no respect for individual rights. See, that's part of the problem. That's why we want to have a republic in this country and not a pure-on democracy, because the majority in India is Hindu, and there has been ruthless persecution of Christians there, as I just reported. As a matter of fact, going back to 2013, before this prime minister, who was a Hindu nationalist, came to power, India was not even in the top 30 nations. Now they're number 10 in terms of the most dangerous countries for Christians, more dangerous than Syria, more dangerous than Iraq. Isn't that interesting? And this is something that is not just the people. This is government involvement here. As I pointed out, in 2019, there was a record 328 violent attacks against Christians. Only 36 of them had a police case filed. None of them resulted in prosecution. More than 300 Christians were detained without trial for their faith. Countless businesses, homes, and schools were looted, burnt down, and vandalized in India. Churches have been torched. Worse, the police will commonly arrest the victim and charge them with trying to convert Hindus, a charge that is punishable by 7 years in prison. Meting out much of the violence is an all-male paramilitary youth wing linked to Mr. Modi's party, the BJP, writes the Sunday Telegraph of the UK. Mob attacks using heavy iron-bound bamboo sticks, kind of like the fascista that the Romans used to use, right? It's kind of a symbol of power. You would take a bunch of sticks and you would tie them together in a bundle. Well, they're actually using these. That's the favorite weapon, but they take the bamboo sticks and bind them with iron. Christians make up only 2.3% of India's population. So you can have a democracy where the other 98% are constantly beating and killing the remaining 2% if you don't have any individual rights. And we're getting dangerously close to that with our Democrat Party here. We're going to talk about death by socialism. This is just one way it can happen when you have no respect whatsoever for individual rights. And there is no respect for individual rights in the Democrat Party. They will talk forever about a woman's right to choose. As a matter of fact, I was looking up Bloomberg's, doing some research on Bloomberg, looking at his girlfriend. He's had a long-term girlfriend. He was married at one point in time, got divorced, and the two of them have never married. She said, well, yeah, I'm a registered Republican, and I'm kind of a libertarian light. Real light. If you are hanging out with Mike Bloomberg and you got no problems with what he's doing, yeah, he will, not give you a choice about even what kind of soda pop you want to drink or what quantity you want to drink. But he wants you to choose whether or not you can kill your kids at any stage, right? That is what we're talking about here. And I, quite frankly, I can't see any area where Mike Bloomberg doesn't think that he knows better than you. Everything. And it kind of reminds me, when I see these elitists who call themselves libertarians, I'm reminded of Alan Greenspan. He was once part of Ayn Rand's inner circle. And until he got the levers of power. And then he decided that he would have his own personal Galt's Gulch where, hey, I'm okay. The hell with everybody else. I'm good. And I don't really care about anyone else. That's what you see from these elitists who are libertarians, quite frankly. And libertarianism, without being moderated by a Christian concern for others, can be just as monstrous as any other ideology, quite frankly. Anyway, going back to India, the story of one pastor, Jai Singh, a pastor of a church, on Christmas Day, the Indian police, prevented an RSS-led mob. That's the group of these mobs. RSS is their initials, from carrying out a violent assault on his church, but they didn't prosecute any of them. 11 days later, they returned. This time they beat him and his 15-year-old son and dragged the pastor to the village square. He said they hit me with their fists. Then they took me into the temple, the Hindu temple, and beat me with sticks before stretching my legs back as far as they would go. He suffered 2 broken feet as well as permanent nerve damage in his legs. The police broke up the beating after an hour. This went on for an hour, bending his legs back as far as they would go, beating him severely, breaking his feet, permanent nerve damage to his legs, and the police took a powder for an hour. But then they arrested the pastor, accusing him of breaking the law by distributing church funding to Christians, other Christians. He was held in jail without access to his epilepsy medication for 3 days before local Christians raised his bail of $112. That's how poor the people in India are. Pastor Singh said he was surprised to be released, as the mob had threatened the police and the courts not to accept bail for Christian leaders. But he was also not surprised to hear that they had not arrested anybody. So that's India. Just keep that in mind as you see President Trump talking about how wonderful democracy is in India. And quite frankly, what they're pushing for there is a trade deal, because this is an act of worship to the real God of America, the military-industrial complex. They're hoping to get a $3 billion weapons deal into India, because those people who do this kind of stuff ought to be given state-of-the-art weapons. Don't you think? This having to use bamboo sticks that are just tied together with iron straps to beat the Christians, don't you think they can do better? They've probably got some nice non-lethal stuff that the military-industrial complex could sell them, and they could test it out before they use it on us here in America. Yeah, that's really what we're talking about. And as we look at the statement last week from Mick Mulvaney,